So we learned about useEffect. Just like with useState, you can have multiple useEffect calls in one and the same component. You can have as many as you want, just as with useState. So here I could have another useEffect call, and in this function I just want to console log rendering ingredients. I'm not specifying a second argument, and therefore this will run for every re-render cycle here. So if I now save this, you see it runs twice. Reason for that simply is this component gets rendered, and then this first effect also executes and goes ahead, fetches data. So that's the first render cycle. And then once this data fetching is done, which happens in the future because it takes a while, only a few milliseconds, but still, then we update the state and hence we re-render this component again. And therefore we have another render cycle, and that's why we see rendering ingredients twice here. So you can have multiple useEffect calls, and you can control how they execute with this second argument, with this array. Now, you should configure this array in an honest way though, so you should really specify your dependencies. If you have a dependency, like for example, here I'm outputting user ingredients, then you should specify it. You can of course omit the second argument if you know you want to run this for every re-render cycle, but if you know you only want to run this if this changed, then you should specify that in this case, user ingredients is a dependency of the second effect. And this means that this function here will now only run when user ingredients changed. Right now in this app, that's the same as running it on every render cycle. But if we had something else that could be executed, which also re-renders this, let's say we had some other value we're managing in there, which we can change with a setState call in the end, then this function would only execute if user ingredients changed and not if that other value changed. And we'll see that concept of having arguments here throughout this module because it is very important. So that's useEffect and how you can configure it, or at least the basics about useEffect. But there's more to useEffect than what we see thus far.